Welcome to the Tuesday, November 9th edition of the Rotowire NFL podcast brought to you by WynnBET. I'm Joe Bartel, and as always, my co-host alongside me today is Jake Letarski. You can follow him at RotoJake, at myself at JB Fantasy Sports. Obviously, we got a Monday night game that we, I guess, theoretically need to discuss. I'm sure the officials will be discussing it way more than we will following Monday night's contest. We also have tons of waiver wire pickups to possibly mention, at least from the wide receiver position. I think there's a few names to monitor as well, too. Before we do all that, though, let's get a word from our sponsors, WynnBET. If there's one thing we appreciate here at Rotowire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with Rotowire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more right at your fingertips. If you want a break from sports betting, head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down, blackjack, slam slots, or always try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia. While rapidly expanding at WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all Rotowire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. All right, Jake, I had talked about a little bit at the top of the show. The Steelers and Bears played a football game on Monday Night Football, and the refs also played one too. As a Packers fan, it pains me to say it, but I think the Bears got absolutely screwed throughout this entire contest, and I, for once, will be siding with Bears fans when they are fighting the NFL and how bad this officiating has been throughout the entire season, certainly last night.
Yeah, you took the lines right out of my mouth, Joe. I mean, normally it brings me such great pleasure to see the Bears in pain, but actually this one, I can sympathize a little bit. It was pretty bad. I mean, if you haven't seen the video of the ref hip checking the Bears player, then 3-point fadeaway the flag, with the leg kick and everything, it's terrible. I mean, like, is the taunting rule how the NFL is going to fix games this year? Like, that's what I mean. Obviously, that's not the case, but that's watching that game is what that makes you think here. So, I mean, it was a horrible game. Up until the very, very end. Into the very end, then the Bears suddenly made it a little close, despite the officials. But it was a tough one to sit through quarter one, quarter two, because the Bears, they were lifeless for the longest time. The offense didn't have anything going. I mean, even the defense that you can normally respect wasn't. I mean, they got scored on easily early on, and then all of a sudden things started turning around a little bit. Maybe the Bears started to realize the cards were stacked against them, and they wanted to prove everyone wrong and the fixers wrong. But I mean, just one of the worst displays of officiating that I've ever seen, and I'm not even exaggerating. I mean, it was horrific, horrendous. But beyond that, tons of fantasy stuff to talk about in this game. I mean, there are a lot of individual players that were affected, injuries, players coming back, players leaving. So I guess I got to start off first. Khalil Herbert is a complete afterthought with David Montgomery back, right. So we can safely bench, if not cut him, and we can definitely cut Damian Williams, right? So we had that. Number two thought, Fields looked okay at times. He led that touchdown drive, the go-ahead touchdown drive to go up 27-26. If you were watching it, I forget which announcer it was, but they suggested they go for two in a tie game after the penalty. That was laughable. But I mean, that
the Monday night announcers have been so bad this entire season. But that pass has been saving everybody.
Yes. But that display of just obviously horrible announcing was just overshadowed by all the other chaos that was going on. So people let that one slide under the radar, I feel like. But so that was going on.
Just real quick, because you were talking about the horrible announcing. I love Steve Levy. I think he's the main caller right now for Monday Night Football. But the fact that he thought the ball hit the front of the crossbar and bounced off on that 65-yard attempt by Cario Santos at the end was an absolute joke. I'm like watching them like, no, there's literally no way that hit the front of the crossbar. That was short by at least 10 yards. And he's like, and it hit the crossbar. No, I mean, that was embarrassing. It fit exactly the tone of the entire game.
Well, actually, my first thought was, maybe him and I have the same vision problem or something, because I actually thought for a second it hit the crossbar too. Because I was sitting there, I was standing up, I was like, oh my God, it's heading there, it's heading there. And then I was like, it's going to doink. It's going to be a Bears doink. Like it would be a classic doink to end the game. But no, then I saw it and I was like, wait a minute, what did I just see? What did he just see? Maybe it's I don't know, one of those when sight and sounds sync up and maybe leave
like what color is the dress, blue or gray?
Yeah, synesthesia. Yeah, it's a word. It's a word like that. It's a big word. But anyway, Yeah, no, it's like SY at okay. Maybe someone in chat can help us out. We don't have a Jamie off to the side here or
Right.
anything, giving us this information here. But no, so Bears fantasy stuff. I don't know, man. They got screwed, but still, like, how long does Nagy
Allen
make it
Robinson
through the
sighting.
season? If
Allen
there was an
Robinson
Allen
sighting.
Robinson sighting briefly, Jeff, who does the Monday show, had a great tweet about like, oh, this is just the next level brain where they were saving him to the absolute end when they actually needed him for this game. I'm still on the cut Allen Robinson train, even if Fields is improving, but we can move on from that. The Steelers side, there's some interesting fantasy developments here because number one, Pat Friarmuth looked awesome.
Yep.
And he's looking like he could be in tight end one territory, especially if
Ebron's
Eric Ebron's out. Yeah, if Ebron's not playing, he's missed back-to-back games. Now, he was actually trending in the right direction for this game, according to our last news update, but it didn't quite work out that way. And the other thing to watch is Chase Claypool suffered an injury, an undisclosed injury. Pretty mysterious. We'll have to wait for the injury report this week, but all it takes is one more pass catcher to go down there. And not only does that guarantee Deonta 20 targets, but Friarmuth is going to be someone that Big Ben looks to in the red zone. Of course, everyone draws out the Heath Miller comparisons right on the telecast because that's the easy thing to do. But no, he's actually looking like he could be a pretty good fantasy asset here and someone that might be helpful. And I think his availability fits our threshold. I had actually jotted him down, or we mentioned him last week, right?
Yeah.
As someone that maybe could be picked up. He's only rostered in 41% of leagues. I guarantee you that got affected by first come, first serve waivers from people who were watching the game last night. But only 41%. So there's some availability there. We can, get ahead of our waiver portion there and skip over him when we get down to tight ends.
Not only are we going to get ahead of that, I actually am going to go ahead and say I think Friarmuth is one of the top pickups overall this week. If you haven't had waivers, go ahead or anything like that. We mentioned Logan Thomas, and I think Logan Thomas's value is still not quite above our threshold from a tight end perspective. If you're looking for number 9 or number 10, it would go Logan Thomas and then Friarmuth for me. But I think both are near the top of the waiver wire only because A, we're not losing a lot of teams from the bye week perspective, at least fantasy relevant guys. And then B, there wasn't a lot of running backs that jumped up into the equation this week. There's a few that we'll talk about in a little bit. But from a waiver wire perspective, it's much more wide receiver heavy. And I think by default, Friarmuth has looked great. Worth pointing out, he actually was still a pretty darn good fantasy asset when Ebron was healthy that week before. So it wasn't just, Ebron's gone, Friarmuth has emerged. Yeah. It was the week before that Friarmuth also had, I think, like a 6-catch, 50-yard day or something like that. And then, of course, the last 2 weeks he's had the 2 touchdowns, or I guess 3 over 2.
Yeah, so Ebron missed the last 2 weeks now, but even then he had never gotten more than 2 or 3 targets, and he hasn't scored a touchdown really. So, Ebron being out solidifies it, but you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean make or break start sit Friarmuth based on Ebron. So a good call there, but I'm really curious to see what happens with this Claypool thing because obviously they already lost Smith-Schuster for the season here, and it doesn't look great there.
Well, you know who I jumped to right away, right?
You jumped to James Washington, right?
I do jump the $210 NFFC bid James Washington that this dumbass ended up doing, and my team is doing fine right now.
I did the same thing in our 14-team dynasty. I bid like $330 on him a couple weeks ago because I looked at, I have guys dropping like flies for IR, RIP Derrick Henry in that dynasty league. But I looked, I was like, geez, there's no one available in this league. It's pretty disgusting. So Washington was the guy just in case something like this were to happen. So yeah, maybe he merits a little sneaky ad. And I did go up and look up Logan Thomas's. Only 53%.
Right.
People didn't listen to us last week and didn't pick him up last week. I guess, tough roster decisions, even though there are only a couple teams on bye, but only 53%. So yeah, I've been holding on to Thomas and Kittle in our Rotowire Invitational League. So and Hunter Henry, so I could start somebody. So I've been sitting there holding 3 tight ends for the last 6 weeks, and it's been painful. But I'm finally excited to get some of these guys back.
I'm in 15 leagues, and I tweeted this out earlier last week that Dan Arnold was starting in 7 of them. I ended up moving it down, I think, to 5 because I got Friarmuth in 2 of those just off of waiver wires, and I also have Logan Thomas planned for a few of them. I think a lot of people, it was tough decisions. The Seahawks and Buccaneers were 2 teams on bye last week, had a number of big guys that you were likely starting, and it's just taking away some of those roster spots. I think Logan Thomas, especially now that I think he's turning back this week. It almost seems like a certainty.
Yeah, we don't really have. Do we really have anything to know that for sure though?
I thought
Or
when the injury happened, it was a minimum 3-week stay type of deal.
gotcha. Oh, you know
And
what?
with the
You know what
bye
my
week
brain
happening
went?
too.
My brain went to Fitzmagic because there's been a weird
Yeah.
amount. So Logan Thomas tested his hamstring injury on Monday. That's really all we have. His practice window is expected to open. So that's good. But how tight is Logan Thomas's value to Fitzmagic? Because he's the one that is the news. It's been a couple weeks and he was slated for another MRI. We just haven't had news on him.
Curtis Samuel, I think by default, Thomas is their second best guy, and it's by pretty
Oh, yeah.
large, right behind Terry McLaurin. I think Logan Thomas, when he's healthy, is a 5-catch, 50-yard type of dude every single week, and that matters. I think that's going to be enough value where you should be going ahead. And there aren't enough tight ends that are doing well. Julia in the chat's talking about George Kittle. Great. He got his first touchdown catch of the year, came back fine.
Yeah.
But like I'm saying, like even George Kittle, like Darren Waller for many weeks hasn't been very successful. I think
Waller got a big bump in targets this week, though.
He
so
did.
I think he's
you
coming
can
back.
make a case in rostering both Logan Thomas and Pat Friarmuth as top pickups this week on the basis of many tight ends are not at the level that you'd anticipate. Travis Kelce, I know he did against the Packers, got a touchdown, but even he's still struggling too.
Is it still? I mean, Kelce has the most points of any fantasy tight end, right?
Probably
it's
by
not even
a significant
close.
margin.
Yeah. So is it still Kelce, Waller, Kittle, or Kelce, Kittle, Waller? Is it still those three at the top? That's their Kelce tier of his own. Then those next two. Are we putting anyone else in there?
Yeah, I think Waller had taken a step back for a lot of people, and Hockenson was in that range a little bit more. There's also Kyle Pitts too, right? I mean, Kyle Pitts has kind of made his emergence over the past couple weeks, and I think
I'd still rank him fourth. I mean, the opportunity's there, but like even without Ridley last week, he didn't have the greatest fantasy game.
That's fair enough. I want to circle back real quick to the David Montgomery news. That was kind of crazy that I have Montgomery in both stake league and in the NFFC, probably my two highest stakes leagues out there. And we had the news Friday that he might be back. And I kind of went on a whim and said, okay, I'm going to have Montgomery in my starting lineup in both of those. And it worked out that he was activated and immediately got the bulk of the workload. If Justin Fields continues to look pretty good as a quarterback, I think that only benefits David Montgomery, right? Or
so let's not get it twisted, though. I mean, Fields looked good for a couple of drives in the second half, right? He was still his regular horrible self in the first half. So we can't. I mean, and listen, I don't want to rag on the guy too much. I think he still might be long term good, right? But he's going to take his lumps this year, and that's fully expected. And then he's going to have to learn a whole new system next year, and that'll be shaky. But again, that's just the organization. But no, Montgomery is RB1. Like I said off the top, cut Damian Williams and Khalil Herbert. You bench in deeper leagues and you cut him in shallower leagues. I mean, there were some wildcat touches that made things interesting where Herbert and Montgomery shared the backfield. So, and that seemed to be a technique that was working for them, which you wouldn't think that necessarily with Fields being the running quarterback he is. But no, Montgomery's back. He seems like his regular self. He's getting the bulk of the workload there. So there's wedding, UFC, a whole bunch of things I had this weekend, and
and college basketball.
And college basketball. And I started Khalil Herbert in a league, and I never went back and turned around. I didn't realize what the what was going on with Montgomery
stats, which came
until
Saturday.
it was too late. It was too late. Yeah. So that was a bummer. I ended up losing that matchup, but no, other than that, it was actually a pretty good fantasy week.
I mean, I'm not jinxing anything, so I'm not going to talk about my fantasy laps more. I have of the 15. 6 that are looking really good, and that's all I'll say. And just hopefully it continues on throughout. The 6 are looking really good, and only 3 are not. Unfortunately, one is stake league, but that's fine. Let's turn our attention to the quarterback position from the waiver wire perspective. I think there's a couple of different ways we can tackle this overall, but I'd rather start with the guys that seem like the top streamers. And I'll say this because of Ben Roethlisberger, who we just saw Monday night, going against the Lions. That should theoretically be a pretty good matchup, even if we don't have Chase Claypool, even if there is some injuries that the Steelers overall are dealing with on the offensive line and whatever else. I mean, the Lions are one of the worst teams in the NFL. And I think Najee Harris is okay, but I don't think he's good enough to really threaten them. So I think by default, Roethlisberger has to pass plenty, and that's going to have fantasy value for him moving forward.
I mean, Lions have been dreadful against running backs. I think they're, let me see, I got it up here. I always keep this page up. I mean, they're the second worst team against opposing running backs in standard formats. They're the, what I'm trying to say here is that it could be a 40-point Najee Harris game. I mean, this is one of the first times since earlier in the season I really watched him for an entire game, and he looks pretty good. He is breaking tackles. He welcomes contact. He's awesome. So he's going to be, and he dominates the usage more than any other running back on any other team in the league. So, definitely, a top 5 player. If you were redrafting today, I'd say that we kind of had that conversation last week. But yeah, Big Ben could absolutely get into the streaming conversation this week. I mean, he didn't look too bad. I mean, the one knock on him is, which continues to get reemphasized, is he is not mobile at all. Did you see when he tried to pull his own read on 3rd and 2 and made
I
that
thought his knee was
looking
a yard short, clearly.
Yeah, I didn't think he got it, but officials of that game, whatever. But no, he could be streamed against a team like the Lions. I don't know what kind of rest of season value there is.
All matters is this week. I think that was kind of my emphasis. I think Roethlisberger is a a quarterback 14 or 15 at minimum against the Lions this week.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And then, the streaming situation, it gets interesting because, there isn't a ton right under our threshold. But I mean, if you look, Matt Ryan's actually only 56%. I think you could get him against the Cowboys and do worse. I mean, again, it doesn't make our threshold, but, if 44% of leagues he's out there, you can maybe think about it. And, a couple of these guys that were just over the threshold, or I mean, I don't know if I'd go as far as to stream Baker Mayfield against the Patriots, but he's only 37% rostered. And, that could be an okay-ish rest of season option. I'm looking at his schedule after the Patriots. He's got Detroit, back-to-back Ravens. That's weird. Vegas, Packers, Steelers. So, I mean, it's an okay rest of season schedule. I guess if you have to stream someone. But, if you're streaming, you're rotating week to week. Yeah, I'd go – for Julia's question, she just asked straight up Big Ben or Mayfield. This week it's Big Ben. Rest of season,
I don't even answer. So this is what I'd say.
Yeah.
I think when you are in this situation, when you're debating between Big Ben or Mayfield, it really is a week by week basis. So this week is Big Ben. Next week, I'm not sure. It could be Jordan Love if Rodgers gets the worst version of COVID possible, or some. I'm just like, there are going to be different quarterbacks that pop up each and every week. This week, it's Big Ben and nobody else. You could make a case if Taysom Hill is your starting quarterback for the Saints, maybe there's that value there from the rushing perspective, but I haven't seen Sean Payton confirm whether or not Taysom Hill is your starter. And I'll tell you what, I was burned big time by that decision, and the Saints were too, thankfully. I know that they kind of came back in the end, all because Trevor Siemian, I called him Brett Ripien last week, all because Trevor Siemian decided to actually turn it around a little bit. Taysom Hill is your better option, and it's not even close, and I don't even think Taysom Hill is that good. So if the Saints want to continue being competitive, I think Taysom Hill, your $100 million quarterback, has to be the guy, but Sean Payton has not made that call just yet.
Yeah. So that's going to be a real tough situation. You can't really trust and pick up any of those guys if you don't know who's getting the bulk of the snaps even, and if it's a 2-quarterback system. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there. So outside of that, I mean, I just got a real big grab bag of hitters, and we really kind of went off on a tangent about tight ends at the beginning of the show. Want to run through the grab bag? You want me to do them quick hitter style?
Yeah, and then we'll talk Jordan Love.
Okay, I'll end on Jordan Love. Yeah. Okay, Trevor Lawrence has a low ankle sprain, but he returned to the game and is expected to play against the Colts, just in case CJ Beathard is the backup. Sam Darnold, I believe, is getting an MRI. He might be at risk of not playing. PJ Walker is the backup there. Zach Wilson isn't quite ready to go yet, but it looks like Mike White might be back. So that's good for one of our receiver pickups later on in the show. And then I also want to maybe just note, you spec ad on Trey Lance. Now, he didn't come into the game on Sunday for his usual packages. Maybe he wasn't quite 100%, but it's not like Jimmy G looked great here. And, we'll see what happens here with this whole situation. But, if you're really digging deep for a spec ad, maybe Trey Lance. So now let's touch on Jordan Love. I know you've got something to say. I'll let you take the cake there.
So Monday Night Football broadcast took a big L throughout the game, as did the Bears and Steelers, as did the refs, right? We can admit that the broadcast was bad. Troy Aikman took an even bigger L on Sunday. I felt I was walking away from that game kind of positive with some of the things that Jordan Love have. And you would have thought Troy Aikman was talking about Jordan Love like he was a third string quarterback for BYU. I mean, he was just absolutely dunking on Jordan Love left and right until the very end, when I swear to God, a producer came in his ear like, Troy, did he do something to your family? Why are you being so mean to Jordan Love? Because then he kind of walked it back. The blitzing thing was an issue. And I was disappointed that Matt LaFleur and company didn't better prepare Jordan Love for that situation, especially in the second half when it felt like the Chiefs said, F it, let's just go go 9
Yeah.
blitz every single time. But there were definitely positive moments, and you would never have guessed that if you just listened to Troy Aikman talk about him.
Right up until that interception at the end, Love had a better quarterback rating than Mahomes. Everybody was seeing, and you would have never been able to tell that by listening to the broadcast. Also, someone should maybe remind Troy Aikman about what his stat line was in his very first NFL game
when he started his season 2.
Yeah. So, Love took a whole lot less headshots than him. So,
right.
I think that's starting to surface here. I don't know how long he is for this, but anyway, but no. So I actually thought, listen, you're right. I came away with a couple of reasons for optimism. Maybe it's slightly blind Packer fan optimism here, but I wasn't horrified by how he played by any means. And they would have been in a very good position to win that game had it not been for the horrific special teams. The block kick, laces out, or the missed kick. Come on, laces out.
They gave him 13 points, right?
Yes,
the 2 missed field goals and then the fumble at the
muff kick. Yeah. So, and the defense, and Chris Barnes played amazing in that game. The defense certainly played. If the defense plays like that the rest of the season, and Rodgers comes back, they won't lose another game.
So I'll stop you right there, and I'll just say we've seen other teams do this before, and I think Andy Reid's a smart coach. I think Andy Reid correctly identified, oh goodness, this Packers offense probably can't move the ball. Let's just not make mistakes, and we can win this game. Now, should Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce be in an offense that decides, hey, let's not make mistakes and we'll win? No, but that's what the Chiefs are right now in this season. So I think if Rodgers is playing, the Chiefs might do a little bit more, I guess I'll say eccentric. I don't know. They'll be more competitive offensively. And I'm not willing to quite say this defense was insane, but they played great. And I thought Jordan Love was more than adequate, and Troy Aikman really didn't. Exactly. There are a lot of things that Jordan Love can work on, but in his first game, one that he was going to have to start within 4 days' notice or whatever it was, I was more than I was happy with what happened. I wasn't ecstatic, and I was hoping for better, but I was happy with what happened.
And you're right about Mahomes. If you're going up against Rodgers, you're going to be a whole lot more aggressive on offense. That is a great point. The one last thing, because I don't want to lean too much on the Packers side of this game, is the Chiefs now, they barely escaped with the win over the Giants. They barely escaped with the win over, a Jordan Love-led Packers team. They're about to have the rest of the season. They face the team with a winning record right now, every single week here. So will a day of reckoning come for Kansas City? We will see, but they're going to have to play a whole lot better than they have the last 2 weeks.
Real quick, if Rodgers is out this week, and it sounds like he might be able to play, he's eligible to turn off the COVID list Saturday. They play Sunday. It sounds like, at least right now, that he will be out there to play Sunday, but let's just say he's not. Would you start Jordan Love in like a super flex or a super deep league where let's just say 20 other quarterbacks are rostered? I had to do that this past week, so I'm asking.
I know. My brother Gabe had a dilemma this week where he's like, Mac Jones or Jordan Love. It's like, ooh boy, in a 2 quarterback league. Definitely not great. The Seahawks, I noted they're kind of a middle of the pack pass defense. They're giving up 22.1 standard points a game to opposing quarterbacks through 8 weeks. That ranks them 14th out of 32 teams. So they're just very middle of the pack. I wouldn't feel excited about Love, but, if I had to pick between Love or CJ Beathard or PJ Walker, then, I'd probably lean Love.
So Jared Goff against the Steelers, Trevor Lawrence, I don't even know who he plays against, or Jordan Love?
I guess Lawrence, if he's healthy, right?
See, I would rather go Love. I mean, the only reason I'm asking is maybe somebody else would go that direction. But again, we don't know. It depends on if Rodgers is or is not available to play, obviously. So that was one of those questions that I'm going to have to unfortunately make. The easier question for those listening out there should just be, Joe, don't play in that league. And, I am actively trying. I just hate myself enough where I continue to do that each and every week.
Yeah. And for the record, Lawrence plays the Colts, who are giving up the second most points per game to opposing fantasy quarterbacks. They have picked off opposing quarterbacks 10 times, which is the second or the third, fourth most in the league. They're getting turnovers, but they've also given up 23 passing touchdowns. And, part of this is they haven't had their bye week, but 23 passing touchdowns is 3 more than even the Washington football team. So the Colts, you think of them as a pretty good defensive team. Part of it is probably them getting out ahead, using the run game, building leagues, and then giving up garbage time stuff. So that's definitely part of that narrative. But, the Colts surprisingly aren't, I guess a couple.
They haven't really been
recently. Able to. You know what I'm thinking? Yeah, you know what? Against the Jets. The Jets are too fresh in my mind. You're right. Okay, fair enough. That was a bad point by me. But I'm just saying the numbers,
I'm surprised. I'm glad you pointed that out. I would not have guessed that
Mhm.
given the reputation. I know they're missing a ton of secondary pieces.
Yeah.
They're starting 2 practice squad safeties, but
Mhm.
that's actually interesting. You're right. Maybe I would lean
They're
Lawrence
one
a
of
little bit.
only 6 teams giving up greater than 8 yards per attempt in the passing game.
Wow.
So, uh, I'm surprising myself reading these numbers. So
Jake coming heavy with the stats. I like it.
we're throwing that out there. All right.
I like it. Let's turn our attention to the running backs, but before we do so, get a word from our sponsors, Yahoo. The new NFL season is finally here and kicking off, and Yahoo's excited to kick off daily fantasy football. There will be a ton of big prized contests throughout the season on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate the opening of daily fantasy football and the continuation of becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim free $10 in contest entry credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 contest entry credit offer to join one of Yahoo's biggest contests. In addition to the free credit, Yahoo has a $1 million DFS contest going live every week. The $1 million contest obviously features $1 million total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and an entry to the first ever Yahoo Fantasy Football Championship live finals event, which will occur at the MGM National Harbor in Maryland this December. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer and get started. Okay, running backs. We had mentioned McNichols and Adrian Peterson last week. Obviously, Peterson scores a touchdown. McNichols doesn't have to do much because the Titans defense wins them that game against the Rams. We had mentioned Carlos Hyde because James Robinson might get hurt. Lo and behold, James Robinson might not play. Hyde does end up being the starter, does enough from a start-sit perspective. But the real guys, Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, we had talked about on this very broadcast, go ahead and play both because the running game from the Chargers absolutely stinks. Well, one of them worked out beautifully in Jordan Howard, not so much of Boston Scott. And I think we have to kick off our conversation there with Jordan Howard being possibly a top pickup this week. I'm curious your opinion. I have my thoughts. What's your opinion on Jordan Howard?
Yeah, this is I don't know. I've got some Jordan Howard bias from past years that I can't seem to shake here
Negative ones,
necessarily.
right?
Yeah, negative
Yeah.
ones. So I'm not awfully excited about it. Really, I'm not. Just because what's gonna happen is the Eagles are gonna fall far behind this week and suddenly it'll be a Gainwell week. You know what I mean? And who Gainwell, listen, reacting to last week, he should be cut, right? But I don't trust any consistency in that backfield. It's like a Patriots backfield almost, where I don't like messing around in it too much. Scott and Howard are startable. Both of them are startable equally if you have to start or flex them. So you think about that. I mean, we got the Bears, Bengals, Texans, and Giants on bye, so not a ton in terms of running backs. You're mixing your Montgomery if you're unfortunate enough to be rostering Texans players or Devontae Booker. I guess I don't have a ton of, hard hitting analysis here. Like what was good last week was great, but I don't know if I'm ready to chase the box score is what I'm saying.
I completely agree with you. And I think a lot of people are going to see what he did and think, oh, yep, got to go ahead and get me some more Jordan Howard. And I just want to reemphasize the Chargers defense is miserable at stopping running backs. And while it made sense to do so this past week, I don't see that scenario occurring because Jordan Howard is not that good. They have the Broncos this week, the Saints next week. If you're trying to capitalize on the Miles Sanders injured reserve status, those next 2 matchups are not great by any means. So yeah, maybe Jordan Love, boy. Jordan Howard does get 10 carries against the Broncos and Saints respectively, but I would be willing to bet that it's going to be under 4 yards per carry, and he might be able to score a touchdown. It's not a given with the red zone looks he's had the past 2 weeks. And that to me says, let somebody else overpay for Jordan Howard. I by no means want to go ahead and target him for as high as he probably will be going on the waiver wires this week.
Yeah. So like you said, Broncos 11th best team against the run, Saints the 3rd best team against the run. These are standard formats here. And, the snap share was pretty much equal between Scott and Howard. I mean, Scott was actually on the field for 43%. So he was on the field for more snaps despite getting 7 less carries. And, Gainwell was the one who really hurt. And, overall, relatively close game, allowed the Eagles to keep running the ball, but I don't know how many times we're going to get that game script there. So I'm pumping the brakes. If there is anybody, while Sanders is out, you're right. I think it is Boston Scott. But I mean, listen, you'll get stuck at some point or another, and there might be situations where you pick up Howard. I'm just, you got to temper expectations a little bit. There might not be a better alternative.
Yeah, I mean that's probably true. I feel like the people picking up Jordan Howard this week are picking him up thinking, man, I'm going to get a stud starting running back for the next 2 weeks. And I just don't think that's it. So like if you're investing your waiver wire budget with that premise in mind, I think you're due for a letdown. That's my biggest
Exactly.
concern. I think you're due for
Yeah.
a letdown with that.
It'd be one of those guys where, like, you need a guy to start, and you're thinking, okay, you probably don't want to pick up Deonta Forman. You don't want to pick up, I don't know, let's see, take a shot on Eno Benjamin. I mean, that's kind of the tier that we're sticking in here. Then go ahead and pick up Howard here. But he's going to be real comparable to guys like Brandon Bolden and Devonta Freeman here, who
And they're going to be cheaper, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically.
Are they going to be cheaper? Is everybody really that much on Howard? I surf all of these, and Howard always gets a mention, but he's not ranked near the top. I think the consensus is that it's Bolden.
Okay,
but
I went on ESPN's article this week, and Jordan Howard was like the featured player on that picture page. That was maybe my one concern when it comes to that. I'm leaning your direction, but I have a feeling the general consensus might be more on Jordan Howard. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, let's put it this way. I'd rather pay $2 for Brandon Bolden than $12 for Jordan Howard.
Can you explain the Brandon Bolden part further? Because I think for listeners out there, they might be like, hey, this guy's third string on the Patriots. Why are we doing this to ourselves again?
It's mostly if it is a PPR league, of course, that boosted a ton here because the Patriots, both Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, they both left with head injuries in the fourth quarter. Now, we don't necessarily know what the extent of those injuries are. This is, again, we talk about this all the time. This is one of those things where we don't know on Tuesday. We're just not going to know here. But if Stevenson and Harris have to miss time, JJ Taylor will be involved. But I think it'll be Brandon Bolden looking more like a James White role with plus carries. Now, the matchup isn't great against the Browns here, but if you need a streamer for this week, I'm going to bank 5 or 6 catches from Bolden, especially if you're missing some of those other guys.
Okay, so Bolden's up there, and then Devonta Freeman as well, which I'm surprised, despite the fact that Latavius Murray didn't play this past week. He was only at 20% rostered in Yahoo leagues. I think people were anticipating Murray comes back off the bye, didn't, and that allowed Freeman to once again have a touchdown, look pretty good. I thought he was by far their best running back. And honestly, Julia asks Adrian Peterson or Le'Veon Bell, and I think we kind of have to bring this up in the Devonta Freeman conversation. So I'll let you first talk about Freeman, what your thoughts were and what you saw, and then the Adrian Peterson or Le'Veon Bell conversation next.
Again, the Freeman thing is so dependent on Latavius Murray because Latavius Murray comes in and he cuts into that carry percentage for sure. But this week and last week, Freeman started both games. Mm-hmm. This week, he dominated the snap share over twice the number, at least percentage-wise, as Le'Veon Bell. Now, you just look at the box score, like Freeman had 13 carries, Bell had 11 carries. Okay, fine. Bell didn't get a single target while Freeman got 3. And Bell was and Freeman was on the field for 58.2% of snaps compared to 23.5% for Le'Veon Bell. I just think that this is Freeman's backfield if there's no Latavius Murray. Now, how do I stack that up against Adrian Peterson, who's got the number 3 defense against opposing running backs that has only given up 4 rushing touchdowns the entire season, that is holding teams to 2.8 yards per carry. I know that's not the greatest stat here, but Peterson actually, I picked him up in one league. It's a 10-team league, but honestly, it's a streaming flex position for me, and I don't know necessarily if I'm going to use or even keep him around this week. But, based on his usage, I feel like he'll break down eventually. But, I'll keep him around for a couple weeks just in case. But so I would say for sure Freeman ahead of AP and definitely Freeman ahead of Le'Veon Bell.
That's how I'd have it too. So I think Freeman, yes, if he's available. The fact that Murray isn't able to play after the bye week is concerning. However, if the Ravens foresaw this coming, they would have just put him on injured reserve, saved everyone the heartaches. My thought is Latavius Murray will be back soon, therefore relegating Freeman to being more of the Le'Veon Bell role. Le'Veon Bell should be picked up in almost no circumstances unless we know that Murray's going to be out for an extended period of time. I would then rather have Adrian Peterson over Le'Veon Bell as by default. But I'll take Brandon Bolden. You had mentioned Deonta Forman. I thought he looked pretty darn good in those 5 carries. And if you are the Titans and think, man, why are we playing this 36-year-old running back who wasn't even good last season with the Lions when we have a guy like Foreman who had some burst, had some energy in his carries? I think by the end of the season, Foreman's the person that does more Derrick Henry stuff than Peterson. It's going to be more of just like semantics or locker room hierarchy BS that they would be having Peterson play over Foreman. I think Foreman actually might be okay. And I would, if I'm a speculative ad type of person and having in a 14-team league, I think Foreman actually might be one of my pickups I'd consider for the cheap.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in, yeah, like you said, 14, 16 team leagues and you try to find someone that's going a little bit under the radar, I mean, it can't hurt. Listen, this guy was a third round pick in 2017. He's still only 25 years old. He suffered some major injuries, starting his career off with the Texans, played 10 games his first season. Actually didn't look too bad. I mean, he carried the ball, in his rookie year, he averaged 4.2 yards a carry, 10.4 yards per target. So there's a very small sample size, of course. Then, of course, major injury happens. He gets then he moves to Tennessee, gets he plays one game in 2018, misses the entire 2019 season, goes to Tennessee and is buried after Derrick Henry. Now, I mean, it's his second year in the system. There's some upside with this player. It's not a guy that you go out and spend a ton of fab money on. But if you're content to not overpay for some of the other guys we're talking about, and you want to throw a $1 bid or a $0 bid just to see what happens, then go for it.
Let's do the Eno Benjamin conversation too while we're talking about $0 to $2 big guys. I hadn't even thought about but you were doing the breakdown and mentioned, hey, the Cardinals using Chase Edmunds and James Conner quite a bit. Everyone thinks, great, James Conner going to have a pretty big bump. But hey, Eno Benjamin got a few carries after Chase Edmunds went down, and Edmunds is going to be on injured reserve, it seems like, for at least the next 3 weeks with that high ankle sprain. So is Eno Benjamin a person that in deeper formats is going to get a decent amount of look?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're necessarily going to give Connor 30 carries in a game. And Benjamin got 9 carries in this game. Granted, listen, 31-17 doesn't seem like a blowout, but it was a blowout for most of this game. Let's get real with that. Connor played 83% of snaps through the first 3 quarters, according to Jerry's backfield breakdown here. It was 45 to Benjamin's 10. Benjamin got a little more run in the fourth quarter, but Connor took the final carries of the game when suddenly it's like, oh yeah, they're getting back into this thing. So again, for those who missed it, Chase Edmunds' high ankle sprain is the fear. He's expected to miss multiple games. So yeah, Connor doesn't really have availability. So, you can't say we can't pick him up. He's been awesome. He's going to absolutely elevate himself to RB2 or even greater status over the next few weeks. But I don't see him getting a Najee Harris workload is what I'm saying. And someone sneaks into there and, maybe Eno Benjamin can. So I guess that's what I say for that. It's a $0 or $1 bid. Nothing too crazy, nothing too hype, but he's getting out there on the field. And this is a 2-back offense listen, when they get back healthy, is one of the better offenses, if not the best offense in the league here. Of course, we were missing Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. And James Conner goes off for 37 fantasy points. It's absolutely wild. You never would have guessed that. I had been, funny enough, in one league, I had been starting for the last 3 or 4 weeks because of my running back. I drafted running backs terribly in that league. I had been starting both Conner and Edmunds for like 3 weeks in a row. Just start, get the backfield touch points and the best offense. And who knows, maybe I'll have to change that to Connor Benjamin.
Is there anything else with the running backs that you want to talk about before we move on to wide receivers?
I didn't have much. I mean, Kenyon Drake had a pretty high snap share this week, and Josh Jacobs, people aren't talking about it, but it looked like he got rolled up on a little bit at the end of that game. So I didn't actually write down his availability. I would guess it's probably right around our threshold, but Kenyon Drake could be back into play. He, at least based on the distribution, seems like he's kind of booted Jalen Richard to an afterthought.
All right. Well, Jake, this is a live podcast, so I'm going to have to put you on the spot here. Breaking news from Adam Schefter just now. Nick Chubb and Demetric Felton have tested positive for COVID-19. Both players are vaccinated and thus would be able to play in Sunday's game potentially, but they need 2 negative tests over 24 hours. Ernest Johnson time, right? I mean, he wasn't in this, at least of the COVID stuff. I hate to put you on the spot, but if this is the case and Nick Chubb and Demetric Felton both miss time, is Ernest Johnson now the top pickup overall this week?
Yes, correct, easily. I made a trade in Stake League a couple weeks ago. I basically traded 2 backups in Joe Burrow and Zach Ertz to get Van Jefferson and Ernest Johnson because it's like I wanted to back up Nick Chubb, and now I'm actually really happy about making that move. And I think Ernest Johnson is a listen. I wouldn't say empty the rest of your. A lot of people kept him because of Kareem Hunt still being out. So I don't even know what his. I should probably look at that again. This is live show on the spot. We don't have producers. We're doing our best here. So Ernest Johnson in Yahoo is only 39% rostered. He meets our threshold. So yes, I will say top pickup for Ernest this week. That's definitely something that we want to. I wouldn't say a bid the rest of your budget on unless you're absolutely desperate. and need to have this, or
Again, because Nick Chubb and Felton are vaccinated, so at the minimum, they're probably missing one game.
one week,
Right,
one week I'm looking for. So yeah, he's got to be the top guy here. I like what we're looking at. Let's see.
Against the
See again
Patriots defense. I just want to
against the
reiterate that.
Patriots defense. Okay, that's fair enough. Patriots against opposing running backs they're 15th. They're right in the middle of the pack, giving up 18.1 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Only have given up 2 rushing touchdowns this year, which is interesting, but that can be so game flow dependent. So I don't want to necessarily get super in on that. No, Ernest is someone that you start this week, you roll him out there, you don't question it.
As long as Nick Chubb is out. I don't like the Felton news doesn't really impact things, but if Nick Chubb is out, then
Felton's more of a wide
Johnson,
receiver hiding on the running back depth chart.
Yep. Okay, let's turn our attention to the wide receivers now that we got that breaking news out of the way. We discussed Russell Gage and Tajay Sharp. Boy, that one burned me heavily last week as far as top pickups, with Calvin Ridley out for a period of time for whatever his reasons are for that. Devonte Parker was a top pickup for us as well too. Oops, back on injury reserve. The Devonte Parker train continues on, I guess, or roller coaster, I should say, not train. Train would be great if he was just consistent. We have the roller coaster that is Devonte Parker. Brandon Ayuk, though, decent enough game with Deebo Samuel, a little bit banged up. The 49ers struggling throughout that contest. Marquis Watkins, Van Jefferson, 2 of their pickups this week. I think we have to turn our attention to the Thursday night game, and it feels like we've forgotten it from so long ago. Mr. 2 touchdowns himself, Elijah Moore. If it wasn't for Ernest Johnson and it wasn't for Pat Friarmuth doing his stuff, I think Elijah Moore might be one of the top pickups this week.
Yeah, so Alan, who you see on this YouTube channel all the time, does an awesome job making our little thumbnails and everything for the show. He, before I even had woke up yesterday and thought about doing the outline, he had sent me the thumbnail with Elijah Moore on it, right? The top pickup, no doubt, right? And with good reason here. Now, when I was making the outline yesterday afternoon, I was a little bit hesitant because we didn't know for sure what was going on with Mike White. And if Josh Johnson was going to go out and start a quarterback, veteran, the ultimate journeyman, Josh Johnson, I would be, obviously Moore's volume went down a little bit, it seemed like, if I can remember that right, after Johnson came in. But right now it looks like Mike White is trending towards the Week 10 start. Zach Wilson is not quite ready yet, in which case, Mike White dialed in big time on Elijah Moore. Now, I made the just brilliant decision last week of ending up I had a couple guys that were banged up, whatever. I ended up starting Jamison Crowder in 3 leagues or something like that. Almost half
There's
my
nothing
leagues.
wrong with that.
Yeah, because, hey, listen, Corey Davis was out again. And, Elijah Moore, rookie, hadn't gotten a ton of volume here, but it's clear that Moore is White's favorite target, and presuming White starts again this week, Moore is the guy. However, Buffalo Bills is probably – now, listen, it's not like the Jags did a whole lot against them last week. They lost. But, the Buffalo Bills are one of the top defenses, period, in the league. I can look at to see what they are against receivers. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they were close to number 1. Oh, yep, sure enough, number 1 in standard scoring against opposing wide receivers. So that maybe brings a little bit of pause. But rest of season-wise, Elijah Moore is a guy that, maybe after this week or maybe even this week, you can stick him in there at wide receiver 3 and feel pretty good about it. Feel pretty confident.
The talent was obviously there for Elijah Moore. We heard about ad nauseum throughout the training camp period and how Elijah Moore, and unfortunately for a lot of people, I think that caused him to get the 7, 8, 9 round ADP range, which he has not been able to actually fulfill from a fantasy perspective. And probably the reason why we're able to talk about him on the podcast now is because so many people angrily dropped him. But here we have Mike White being a successful quarterback, which is a crazy thought process and even sentence to say right now. And I think that's helping Moore. So my question to you would be, if we have Zach Wilson come back, does Moore then become a guy that you maybe consider dropping? Corey Davis didn't play in that past Thursday game. He's questionable playing this one. Corey Davis felt like that was Zach Wilson's favorite target. Is this maybe more of a 1-week pickup? How should people structure this from a fab perspective?
Yeah, you can't consider it a 1-week pickup if it's the Bills. So, less than Ernest Johnson. But, listen, it's not just – so with Zach Wilson, yeah, he may be like Davis a little bit better here, but Moore is a guy that I see developing and continuing to get better, right? He's starting it's a long season, of course, and you get these rookies adjusting to the speed of the game at this level. And I think his second half is obviously going to look a whole lot better than his first half. So, for that reason, I could see You know, if you're going to make a $26 bid on Ernest Johnson, I would see maybe a $14 bid on Moore if you want to make sure you get him. I don't even know if that locks him in, to be completely honest, because people, I don't know, maybe people have a short memory after Thursday night, but he'll have some hype.
Let's talk about Donovan Peoples-Jones, who had already been kind of trending up in a positive direction. I wonder if this Nick Chubb news only makes Peoples-Jones even more valuable from a fantasy perspective. Odell Beckham, obviously gone. We don't know where he's going to be. We'll probably find out tomorrow, maybe tonight after the end of the show. I'm not sure.
Honestly, it could be any minute now.
Right. I'm not sure where the waiver wire machine will take us on that one, but Odell Beckham possibly either picked up by somebody or in free agency and finding a different team. Either way, Peoples-Jones had that obviously great deep catch, has been having that value more, which is interesting to see. And now we have a Browns offense that could be missing its top overall player, and Nick Chubb won't have Kareem Hunt back just yet, and has Baker Mayfield, who's been kind of looking Peoples-Jones's direction more as the season's progressed.
Yeah, it's tough to look at last week's box score because no Browns receiver got more than 3 targets. Actually, no, I lied. Jarvis Landry got 5 targets, but he did jack with them. So other than that, Peoples-Jones is tied with a bunch of guys next for 3. And he seems like he's a big play guy. He seems like he's an excellent athlete. Obviously, if you're here at this level in the NFL, but he is the wide receiver too in this offense. And, Kareem Hunt's not around to suck up running back targets. I think he could be very successful from a fantasy standpoint and pretty flexible moving forward, like not flexible bendy, flexible as in you could start him in your flex.
You didn't need to explain that, but yes, you're right. Starting in the flex, he might also be flexible bendy, but we don't really know that, and probably isn't worth it.
Also, I'm sure you are if you're an NFL wide receiver, right? You can at least touch your toes here.
And that's something I can tell you right now I cannot do, and I'm not sure if you are able to admit
I can
that on
definitely
air.
do it. I can definitely.
You can touch your toes.
I'm actually like surprisingly flexible for a big guy, but maybe
another reason why I can just
maybe I'll show you guys my yoga
so good at this.
We'll show my yoga videos at another time.
There's a couple of other wide receivers. Yeah, we don't really need to see a couple other wide receivers that I think are all kind of in the same vein. Van Jefferson, Christian Kirk, Russell Gage, Zach Pascal, Rashad Bateman. Of those 5 some. I like Rashad Bateman more because the upside, and obviously I think the rookie first round pick status factors in. Maybe there's some Big Ten bias as well too, having watched him do well in Minnesota. Christian Kirk has been a guy that has been actually consistently in my lineup for the NFFC and a few other leagues often. He also had that pass for 33 yards, near touchdown pass in that win over the Niners. I think so long as AJ Green and DeAndre Hopkins is out, and I think Hopkins could play, Green might be out another week, Kirk becomes the most valuable person out of that bunch, but I'm wondering how you sort of rank those players.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect Hopkins and Green to come back in the very, very near future. It was Green COVID, right? And Hopkins was like a game time decision, so you'd think he'd trend in this direction if he can get out on the practice field. So Kirk was probably a 1 week, and this is in the past. But, again, you monitor the situation, maybe throw a $0 or $1 bid out there just in case. The guy I actually like, so I like Bateman too. I mean, he's number 3 in targets. Now, the 8 targets might be a little bit fluky considering they were somehow behind in Minnesota for most of that game. So they really did have to pass a lot to come back and claw their way back into that game. And that's definitely not always going to be the case for Baltimore. But now maybe it's some confirmation bias because I just traded for him. But Van Jefferson, the Rams are playing 3 wide receiver sets. So he's out there just as much, if not more, than Kupp and Woods. He's getting looks against the Titans. When they were behind, he was getting red zone looks. They were always looking at number 12. And, it surprised me a little bit, but now he wasn't able to convert any of those. But, Stafford's definitely looking his way down in that territory. And who knows, a guy like Jefferson could be one injury ahead of him on the depth chart away from becoming a top 20 wide receiver. And there are a lot of things I like about him rest of the season. And, I wasn't huge on the Van Jefferson hype train. And I guess up to this point, at the beginning of the season, and I guess up to this point, that's been correct because, the top 2 guys are the top 2 guys. Absolutely. But I think he has a surprising amount of ceiling as, just about anybody else out there.
It's interesting. So you bring up the ceiling part of it. Of that group, I think he's got the lowest floor, right? Russell Gage, especially with Calvin Ridley gone, I think is safely a guy that's going to get 5 or 6 targets in an offense that's going to pass a decent amount. Zach Pascal with T.Y. Hilton not around too. Like I think he has some value. I think Pascal actually is a little bit lower in that sense, but the pickup that you recommend with Jefferson is more so what could happen in the event like Cooper Kupp or Woods were getting injured, as opposed to a week by week basis thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, he still had 7 targets last week, and, he only caught 3 for 41, but there's gonna be a Van Jefferson game where he scores 2 or 3 times in the same game, and it
Can you
could
start him
happen.
though? I mean, like
No, you
that's
can't start him. No, you can't start him. But, I mean, I'm just saying that I like what I see out of him. He passes the eye test in every way, shape, or form, and when the Rams find him behind, he's got a couple of big games here definitely coming up over the course of the season. You're right. That might be difficult to start him, but, with a few more weeks of buys and you need a desperate flex, maybe that lands on the same time as his big game. I'm just saying it's coming.
okay. Julie asks why I'm high on Rashad Bateman, and it's a fair question. She says that, Baltimore's running team, Lamar's not very accurate. I think both are just not true, or at least in my sense. So Lamar is actually a pretty accurate quarterback. I think he's on pace right now to have one of the best seasons of his career, and certainly one of the best quarterback seasons when you factor in his rushing, but he's also passing way more. And I think the idea that Lamar is not an accurate quarterback was based in large part on the previous 2 years when he didn't have nearly as much talent at wide receiver that he currently has. Like Sami Watkins would have been his best wide receiver over the course of his career. Prior to this season, he's the number 3 guy right now behind Marquis Brown, who has developed and I think emerged now as a key piece. And I think Rashad Bateman is the number 2 wide receiver. In every game that he's played thus far this season, he's gotten at least 6 targets. At least 6 targets, 8 this past week as well, too. That Ravens offense is one of the best in the league, whether or not they're running the ball. And I think they are one of the best in the league because they have Lamar Jackson now becoming a better passer.
Yeah.
Rashad Bateman has a floor and a ceiling that I think is both good and has more potential to develop as we continue on throughout the year.
Yeah, I will say a couple of updates from yesterday. Hollywood Brown was estimated as a limited participant Monday. He apparently came through with a back issue, so we don't know what that's going to lead to. And Sammy Watkins, same deal, limited with a thigh injury. He was actually supposed to play last week, and then it just didn't feel right in the morning, I guess. I'm pulling these news updates right from the Rotowire website. So, there's some variables there that if one of those, I mean, if something were to happen to Hollywood, and we're playing big ifs, big speculating now,
Sure.
Can't really act on that. But if Hollywood would have to miss a game, I can see double-digit targets in a breakout game for Bateman. I'm with you there. But I don't see how that's necessarily any different than the Jefferson analysis. But
so Bateman's floor is higher than Jefferson, where Jefferson gets those 3 for 40. I think Bateman rest of the season's a 5 for 60 type of guy, because he gives them something offensively that they need. We have Marquis Brown running in the middle, Mark Andrews in the middle. Marquis Brown running deep. You have Bateman in the middle of the field, but can also go deep, and Andrews in the middle of the field. I don't care if they run the ball 30 times. When you have talent like Marquis Brown, Mark Andrews, and Bateman all in the field, somebody is going to be open. And if I'm a defense, I'm going to say, hey, let's not let the guy that can just run for 90 yards on a streak get open. And let's not have the guy that Lamar always targets first in Andrews be open. By default, Bateman's the guy. And I think at this point, if you think Bateman's not the answer, it's because you don't believe in Lamar Jackson. And right or wrong, that's the choice that you're making in that sense. Can you rank these wide receivers for the listeners real quick? Elijah Moore, we think, is at the top.
Yeah,
but
I'm still going Elijah Moore. I'm going Elijah Moore number 1. I'll give you Bateman at number 2. I will. I like the long-term upside there, though. I'm a little bit worried about that 5 for 60 being guaranteed when Watkins comes back. But I'll give you Bateman number 2.
I actually would have Kirk number 2. That's so I'm just
see. I'm expecting them to get healthy though. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm expecting them to get healthy. So I actually put Kirk number 4 behind Jefferson, and then that's how I'm doing it.
And where does Donovan Peoples-Jones fit in with this situation with the Nick Chubb deal popping up?
5.
Okay. So you'd rather him over Pascal, but none of the other guys.
Yeah, Gage is, man, I didn't even really think about ranking these guys. They're all so close. There's no little bit of analysis I can rip out here and say this is going to definitely make this guy number 2 over this guy number 4. 2 through 4 are pretty much the same in my eyes, and it's whoever I can get for the least cost.
Okay, that's key. Whoever I can get for least cost, I like quite a bit. We had talked about tight ends a decent amount at the top of the show. So I guess I want to reiterate to people, here's how Jake and I are looking at Logan Thomas. If he's still available right now, is currently rostered in 53% of Yahoo leagues. Go ahead and pick up Logan Thomas first. Then I think it's Friarmuth, right? Is that a fair assessment to say for you? Whether or not Ebron is or is not playing, Friarmuth, what he's done right now over the past 2 or 3 weeks, if Claypool is out for an extended time, has now emerged as the number 2 tight end pickup this week. Then it's our boy Dan Arnold. And we've talked about Dan Arnold a lot, so I don't know if we need to spend
I mean,
much
Dan
more time
Arnold,
there.
Tyler Conklin, they're both getting
Right.
seemingly decent target volume there. And if you follow that, they could be a streamable option here. But you definitely start with Thomas and Friarmuth this week for sure.
I'm a huge guy on Dan Arnold, and I played him in 5 of 15 leagues this past week. I would not like to do that in normal circumstances, and especially with the teams that are on bye this week. You likely shouldn't be in a scenario like Arnold is right around tight end 12 through 17 for me. And I guess you can roll the dice and say, hey, this might be the week where we get another 4 for 30 or whatever. I don't know if we can consistently rely on Dan Arnold as a starter, especially in standard formats, because he's not scoring any touchdowns. So I'd rather have Friarmuth and I'd rather have Logan Thomas by a pretty large extent.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Let's get a word from our sponsors, Thrive, before we touch on the defenses real quick. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each week this season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus only on the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free six-month Rotowire subscription. Here's how you claim that free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Visit rotowire.com/thrive. Deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. And then you play in your first paid contest, and therefore you receive a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. So again, rotowire.com/thrive. You then deposit $10 and receive at tops a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. And you then play in a free paid contest to get that 6-month free subscription to Rotowire. Okay. Defensive streamers, I think we could spend real quick amount of time because it's tough. I don't know if there's really a lot of options out there, and it's mainly because we have a lot of teams like the Falcons or Dolphins that we'd use on bye. I'm sorry, not the Falcons, Dolphins, like the Texans that we'd use on to target each and every week. Well, they're on bye.
Yeah, so I was surprised to see the Browns at only 50% rostered. It's not the greatest matchup against the Patriots, but that pass rush gives your defense a pretty good floor on a week-to-week basis. And the week after, they have the Lions, so that's kind of why they get thrown in here. And then otherwise, I mean, the consensus pickup across is the Titans at 10% versus, the Saints and their dual quarterback system, whatever we have going on. The Titans defense looked good last week, so they're in the mix here. I don't think you think about the Seahawks at Lambeau Field, even if it's Jordan Love. They're 11%, and the Broncos are 47%, and they're at least in a home game. So handful of ones to pick up here. But I think the top two are the Browns because of the 2-week pickup. The 2 weeks of benefits, and I guess the Titans just for this week while we see what happens with the Saints offense.
Okay. I like that quite a bit. And, the Titans with what they've been doing over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks make a little bit of sense if you are under the belief that Simeon is your starting quarterback for the Saints. Again, next week he shouldn't be, but maybe that's the case. And then Seahawks as well too with the Rodgers stuff. I think it's at least worthy of considering when we really don't have a lot of other options out there. And honestly, I think this season more than past seasons, there hasn't been many defenses that have emerged on a week in and week out basis that you can consistently start. The Bills might have been up there, I think. The Niners have struggled. The Ravens have struggled. It's not a given each and every week. So I think these streaming defenses, it becomes harder because there's less options out there on a given basis.
Yeah. So we only got a couple minutes left here. Do you want to run through any of these questions at all?
Yeah, there's a few, and we'll start at the top here.
I was going to say I like Robinson and Hawkinson over Patterson and Williams.
Yeah, so the trade was Patterson plus Mike Williams, who has been non-existent almost in the last 2 or 3 weeks for the Chargers, for James Robinson and TJ Hawkinson in a PPR perspective. So which one did you want to go with?
I'm taking the Robinson-Hawkinson side because I would rank Robinson maybe a little higher than Patterson rest of season, and having the tight end one is most valuable. We actually forgot about Hawkinson when doing our rankings. I would actually put him as number 4 tight end rest of season.
Well, I talked about him, and you just said, no, Kyle Pitts is possible in there. And then I was
like, I don't know if I remember that right. We might have to play that back.
Roll it back.
Roll it back. All right,
I tend to agree with you. I think James Robinson and Hawkinson is the safer play, but you're not really selling super high on Patterson. And I think there's probably people who would offer more for Patterson if they knew he was available on available on trades. I guess I'd say it that way. The only other question that we had, I saw
there was one from Pate, Godwin, Pittman, or CeeDee Lamb. I mean, what a great position you're in.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. You're like Mr. Michael Pittman all the way. But yet here's CeeDee Lamb and Chris Godwin, who, at least from an ADP perspective, here's a good 8-team league. Which one do you want to start more?
Yeah, Pittman against the Jags. I don't think he'll necessarily need a lot of usage. I'd start Godwin. The football team is the second worst team against opposing wide receivers in standard formats here. So I think Godwin is your safest bet. I'll take the floor.
Yeah, and see, Pate's going to hate us because I actually like CeeDee Lamb. I think a bounce back week for the Cowboys is going to need to include CeeDee Lamb in there. And I would rather have that opportunity for the upside, which I think Lamb possesses, whereas it could easily be a Mike Evans game or a Gronk game or a Leonard Fournette game. I think the Buccaneers, when you have this great of options, are too hard to really choose from a week-to-week basis. I know Antonio Brown probably isn't playing, which helps Godwin, but I like Lamb as the upside scenario in that case. And we had the chat saying Michael Pittman, so that literally is going to help Pate zero. But that's our analysis on that.
Yeah. I mean, these kind of things are. I mean, when you have three receivers that are that good, any one of them could go off in a given week, and there's not much that us as analysts can say that'll make one option clearly stand out here. I mean, that is a coin toss one at best. What did we have? We had Sutton last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yep.
Devontae Smith or Cortland Sutton. Yeah, I'm looking at these. Sutton has been non-existent since Jerry Jeudy came back. I mean, his before and after, his splits with Jeudy in and out of the lineup are pretty ridiculous. And Cortland's and the Eagles are actually number 4, the 4th best team against opposing wide receivers for whatever reason that is. So give me Smith, I guess.
Yeah, Devonta Smith, though, I know he had this great week this past week. Also hasn't been doing a lot. It was good to see Jalen Hurts finally target his Alabama boy, but previously 1 catch for 15 yards on 3 targets. He had a decent enough game against the Raiders, 5 for 61. Then we flip-flopped it again up against the Buccaneers, 2 for 31, and that was supposed to be a great matchup. I don't know. I think the Broncos secondary is pretty good, but I think by default Smith is your best target, and that's the direction I would go.
I think part of that is with Rager not at 100%. Didn't he get banged up? I thought he wasn't going to play this week.
But he
played, but he just do we have snap counts? He only played 29 snaps, so definitely seemed like a pitch count situation.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, that does it for us on the Rotowire Tuesday NFL podcast. We'll be back in with the Week 11. I can't believe we are able to say that.
Double-digit weeks.
Week 11 waiver wire targets this next week. In the meantime, best of luck with your fantasy lineups.